So to start us off, the North Carolina Rural Center is one of our amazing partners in broadband work. And we are thrilled today that Michael Kelly, the Director of Collaborative Broadband and Innovation, is serving as our moderator today. At the Rural Center, Michael works with local governments and the center's many partners on broadband deployment. He was previously the Director of Regional Planning and Economic Development for 6.5 years at Carter Regional Council of Governments. So he's very familiar with the challenges of COGS and broadband, rural broadband. You can learn more about our panelists on the app, and again, make sure you write down your questions. Welcome, panelists.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, thank you very much, Jess. Our panel today has endless experience working in and with rural broadband partners, and I hope our questions get to the heart of their successes and best practices. So I'm joined here today by Kevin Jackson, IT Director with the Eastern Band of Cherokee, Office of Information Technology, Samantha Schartman, Director of Philanthropic Programs at Connect Humanity, and Christa Vinson, the Senior Program Officer with Rural LISC. But before we hear from our panelists, I want to take this time to speak about the Rural Center's Collaborative Broadband Initiative, and more importantly, what is being done right here in this region. It began in 2022 out of the conversations the Rural Center had with you, our rural communities, about the need for reliable, high-speed connectivity, and taking full advantage of unprecedented amounts of federal and state resources committed to this issue, the initiative was created. The collaborative seeks to bring universal last-mile broadband service to our rural communities using an approach that brings together regional partners such as COGS, local governments, and strategic thought partners to coordinate and support a process for broadband access and adoption. The collaborative has been assisting 15 counties in northeastern North Carolina over the past year and a half with technical assistance, and in 2023, through funding provided through the Dogwood Health Trust, the collaborative is bringing that same level of technical assistance and attention to 18 counties, including the Qualla boundary in western North Carolina. This will come in the form of convenings among stakeholders and partners focused on providers continuously updating residents and county officials on the progress of construction and deployments, negotiations between service providers and local governments with accountability standards to best meet the needs of a county, recruitment of local broadband action teams seen as advisors with an interest in seeing universal last mile service extended into a county, and affordable connectivity options for residents. Looking at data unique to this area, we fully understand broadband availability is low, and as there may only be a few providers able to provide service, and households with no internet subscription is high, perhaps attributed to the high subscription costs offered by such a limited number of providers. The initiative is advising local governments on the various funding opportunities available under the different programs and action steps needed in order to have an eligible grant application. The Rural Center was a strong advocate for the Affordable Connectivity Program and digital inclusion efforts, ensuring that members of all covered populations are represented. The collaborative is making progress in Western North Carolina and are appreciative of the support we have received and are receiving on this initiative from all of you as we further our efforts in this region. At this time, we're going to hear from our panelists. I'm going to turn it over to Kevin.
Thank you, Michael. As Michael said, Kevin Jackson, Eastern Band of the Cherokee Indians, Office of Information Technology. I want to talk about a couple things that we are doing over at the Eastern Band. So the Eastern Band is made up of over 52,000 square acres. Right here is the map of our fiber build. We currently are all part owners in Balsam West Fiber. We own our own ISP, which is a mid-mile, 240 fiber ring. So it touches parts of northern Georgia and parts of East Tennessee. The build out for phase one began in 2024. This year, we are on the boundary now, building out the pink area, which would be the northern part of the Eastern Band's lands. The phase two is the purple, phase four is yellow, or phase three is yellow, and phase four are off boundary. We faced several challenges in developing this infrastructure. A lot of the footprints that go out to all the bidders for the funding are larger ISP companies, commercialized companies that their footprint overlays the boundary. So there's a lot of challenges in building in our area. We are in the process of developing a robust public Wi-Fi and community-based Wi-Fi system. We're fixing to roll it out within about the next 2 to 3 weeks. We are looking to expand that to the footprints off boundary as well that we own. There are a lot of exciting things that we are going to put out for the Eastern Band and for the world, pretty much, as we begin to develop technology. We're working on a digital asset management system. We're going to partner with Cherokee, and we have begun the stages of planning and preparing how to preserve our archives. How do we preserve our identity? Cherokee has come to us. We have vetted them properly. We are looking at data sovereignty. We have to protect that. That's all we have. And with their help, they will help us begin to build our platform. So this is how the platform will look. All the record management, cataloging, where it's going to be published. It'll be for educational purposes. There will be pieces that we red flag that are for enroll members only, but majority of it will be for the world. We want to be able to tell our story. We want to be able to tell people who we are. We want to give you a piece of who we are as Cherokee people that you can't read in books. You know, the pieces that you will not see at a drama. You know, these are the pieces that we live every day. You know, we want to give our families the ability to track and preserve the old collection of photos that bring back memories from 20 to 30 to 40 years ago, hundreds of years ago. So we are in the process of developing that, and it will also help preserve our language. Phase 1 and phase 2 are the archives of the Junaluska Museum. We will work with the Cherokee Museum of the Cherokee People, and we'll begin archiving. We will have a digital archive. We spoke to some archaeologists a few weeks ago, and we asked them, what do you do with all the findings? Where's that paperwork at? And we found out that a lot of it was sitting on the shelves. So it's time to reclaim that. It's time to bring it home to the people it belongs to. We will digitize that, and we will bring it into this archive. Phase 1 is the archive. Phase 2 is the language. As you can see with the slide here, you'll have the type of file it is, the label, which would be the Cherokee word, and then the part of speech. And then you will have your syllabary. That will be what a user we would be able to teach online classes, and a user would see this. The other piece is going to be the photos and the stories, the video, the recordings. As you can see here, there's a story right there with Dr. Tom Belt talking about Judaculla Rock. We will begin to implement those pieces so not only the Eastern Band, but school systems can use this to learn more about the Cherokee people and the homelands that we live on. Right here, we've already pre-built this that has the video with Mr. Belt and just going over that story that's passed down from generation to generation. Phase 3 and 4, we take a 3D approach. Our plan is to meet with our speakers. We will create a digital version of our speaker so you can have that conversation, hopefully forever. You know, when we lose a speaker, we will always have that voice. We will use AI to have that conversation, to ask it questions. So we will see our family members, and we'll be able to continue to carry on a language lesson with them, with the use of technology. Bringing this back home is the fiber and Wi-Fi build. So this is pertinent to the success of this project, and we are striving every day to move it forward. Oh, excuse me. That's all I have. Yep.
Hi, everyone. I'm Samantha Schartman. I'm the Director of Philanthropic Programs at Connect Humanity. And let's see if this works. Oops, that's the opposite direction. Okay. So Connect Humanity is a nonprofit. We are national. We work with communities really around the planning and financing of broadband internet throughout communities. Particularly, one of the projects that I'd really like to talk about today is our Appalachia Digital Accelerator program. That's the program that I head up. We are working currently with 68 communities across 10 states of Appalachia. And really what we're trying to do is help walk through our communities through a 3 vertical planning process. This process includes the digital equity and inclusion and opportunity vertical. That is really what are the support systems that you need to ensure meaningful, safe, and robust adoption, really that is aligned to people's self-interests and personal trajectories. The second one is the access. Where does connectivity need to go? How do you get it there? And of course, the final vertical is how are we going to underwrite the cost of these things? So through that program, we are working with a number of people who are actually in this room. Our friends at Southwestern Commission and Foothills Regional Commission are working with their respective counties on this planning project. And through that, we're hoping to get everyone aligned and working towards accessing the large amounts of federal funding that are available. That being said, what we're finding through this planning process is that there's so many communities that are not going to be eligible. There are problems with our FCC maps. There are problems with the self-reporting of ISPs across the country, not just here, but really everywhere. And what that means is that many of the places that need access or need more support and grant funding are not going to be eligible to get it through this means. So what does that mean for those that might not have that access to the big BEAD funding? Well, really what that means is we need to investigate where our support systems are within our communities, build the needed coalitions, tell the stories, and look at the ways in which local stakeholder, private sector relationships can help underwrite costs and share in the cost financing of these networks. We're finding that there's a lot of Swiss cheese throughout the state of North Carolina, particularly in our Appalachian territories, where there are areas of served and then little patches of unserved territory. And that area is not eligible in many cases. And I know that that's difficult, and we're trying to figure out how do we plug the holes, because it's not a big enough area to attract major new investments, but we need to grapple with it because people live there, people work there, there are businesses at stake. And if left to any of the other current programs, they're going to go unserved. And unfortunately, that puts the pressure on our community stakeholders to fix the problem, right? Or at least to identify the path forward. I often reference that, the state leaders at the state level have received some funding to gear up their capacities, to understand and hire experienced individuals. Our counties, our COGs, they have not. They're asked to do this work without the funding to underwrite additional capacity. They're being required to learn new areas and new skills that they're not familiar with. right? There's a lot of people that we're working with that this is their first foray into broadband. And yet they're the ones that are going to determine the plan for their community for the next generation to come. So what we are doing here at Connect Humanity is really looking at how do we capacitate and bring the support that these communities need to see the path forward and to put the right people, the right relationships and partnerships in place to lead us into a better connected future. Thank you.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. Well, I'm Christa Vinson. I'm with LISC, Local Initiative Support Corporation. We're one of the nation's oldest and largest community development financial institutions. And we're also an intermediary, which means we raise funding to pass through to place-based organizations and supplement that with technical assistance. Broadband infrastructure is a new area of work for LISC, but the adoption and utilization and digital upskilling has been core to LISC's program of work nationwide. So I am part of the national rural team and have been thinking about the question that was the prompt for this panel for a while, which is when we're providing that pass-through assistance to place-based organizations to help them lead, what are the ways to sort of elevate and integrate the adoption use case with the infrastructure planning? And it turns out that thinking about that question is not unlike how we approach a lot of our work as an intermediary. LISC does infrastructure planning in the affordable housing space strongly, and then in other areas of infrastructure development, but all through this lens of capacity building, as Samantha aptly put it. And so really believing in the kind of long-termism of community planning with broadband at the center leads to other economic development, workforce development, community development opportunities. So slide's a little bungled there, but I wanted to acknowledge where this kind of virtuous wheel came from, a place-based foundation that we've worked closely with in Texas, the TLL Temple Foundation, and the Brookings Institution. And Samantha, because it gives me a chance to give you a shout out, I want everybody to know that Tony Pippa with Brookings, who does the Reimagine Rural podcast, just dropped a podcast today on rural broadband. And the story is about Macon County, Alabama, where LISC and Connect Humanity co-invested in the supporting the county's match requirement to deploy a fiber network. And this is in the Alabama Black Belt. This is the home to Tuskegee University. And the Economic Development Organization, Macon County Economic Development Authority, really held the center on that work. And they put in a lot of sweat equity over years to get finally to the point where fiber is coming. And it means a lot to Alabama. So please listen to that podcast and listen to how Connect Humanity is uplifted and their model is really working. I want to tell you, because I think this is useful to see too, the slides got a little bit bungled. Sorry about that, like the transition from PowerPoint to Google, I think. Makes it hard to read, but when LISC was bringing some expertise and experience that we have around digital upskilling and a dearth of understanding about the opportunities and needs and capacity gaps and fund development required for playing this role as a technical assistance intermediary on the planning side, we interviewed a lot of organizations, and I just wanted to show you who we talked to. Of course, Connect Humanity is among that list, some place-based funders, impact investors, I mean, a really range of community broadband, regionally serving ISPs, venture-backed ISPs. We really, councils of government, tried to understand, how our peers and adjacent organizations and then others, right, that are sort of further down the value stream are thinking about this. And so I'll make sure that a good copy of these slides are available because these are resources that might help with planning in North Carolina. This is the thesis of the whole conference and certainly the panel, and I'm just putting this slide in here to underline it, right, that it does make sense, whether it's a grant, loan, or equity investment coming from any entity that's trying to finance that broadband infrastructure deployment, to think about proceeding and coordinating the infrastructure construction with the adoption, with digital literacy programming. I mean, in rural, I believe strongly in the idea that 100 good paying work at home jobs is equivalent to relocating that industry, right, to the local market. So it does make sense to be really thoughtful, and the stakeholders that are at the center of this work, or newcomers to thinking about broadband planning, are thinking about both sides of that value stream together. And in practice, we know it works, because what I'm showing you here, again, sorry for the format, Kylie, I'm sorry, is that LISC funded 70 place-based organizations, nonprofits, mostly direct human service organizations. They're really talented with case management. They're really empathetic and work with individuals and families on how, whatever way they're trying to move forward in life. And we learned a lot about how nonprofits adapt their program of work, how their staff are trained in order to integrate technology, not just from the nonprofit service delivery point of view, but from the household perspective. And it was really interesting to see how many of these organizations really wanted to understand Broadband 101. And I'm going to shout out to my friend Brian Rathbone, who did the very best 10-minute video of Broadband 101 that had been shown to these 70 organizations across the country as they think about what it means to be a digital navigation services provider, and how that might relate to broadband availability and all the kind of the case that Samantha presented in terms of how you get there with the infrastructure deployment. And they're real people and real examples, and I wanted you to see that. And there's our friend from NC 100, Merrill in the room. Always try to follow Merrill wherever he goes. But NC 100 is his organization. I know he serves on the North Carolina Governor's Digital Equity Task Force. And these are, community members from across the country who are touching that digital equity equation in different ways, whether it's workforce development, job development, public safety. The upper left is a wireless deployment in the Navajo Nation during COVID to protect small business capacity. And just saying the same thing again, this is another North Carolina example. We worked with the Upper Coastal Plain Council of Government, and the question was, we can't run a credit card payment if the public safety team is in the field because there's not enough bandwidth. And so how do we think about public safety? And then how do we think about last mile? And how do we pay for it? And how do we in Halifax County connect to other local leaders? And the Council of Government was the right organization to hold that question, and built kind of a case example from, forgive me, I'm not going to remember the name of the town. Maybe you'll remember, in Halifax County. Which one of the largest towns? Enfield, yeah. So this is a plan for the town of Enfield in terms of their public safety network, and then thinking more broadly and beyond, right? From that set of decisions to the next, was something that the Upper Coastal Plain Council of Government was able to take forward with their broadband planning committee. And then on the right, this is another story from the Alabama Black Belt. We worked with an organization, the Elmore Bowling Initiative. They wanted to make sure that every community member had a voice. And so that technical assistance pass-through was about infrastructure, but it was first about Elmore Bowling Initiative having dozens of town halls and participating with the Alabama Department of Commerce and in the BEAD planning process and DEA planning process, and organizing their own meetings and really making sure to kind of have everyone be heard, and facilitating that process was important, because then we could get to what's next for infrastructure. And then, am I going too long, Michael? And then here's one from Texas that also touches Connect Humanity. Your fellow Jordana Barton was at the center of this work. So this is a really interesting story where this town of Brownsville and the city of Farr, there's a municipal network, it's a fiber network, it's attracting population, and the question was, from population attraction to workforce development to tech careers to changing the economy of the Rio Grande Valley. It's a really big thesis statement, but it really started with this one success in FAR. What is the level up? So they called it level up. Our support, made it possible to get the coalition formed and to sustain their initial engagements with one another and to figure out what the story was. And I'll call on Brookings again. It's funny, there was a case study that was published in Brookings saying that the lowest sort of density of IT career potential is in this area of the country, like bottom of the list, but households are connected to fiber, right? So how quickly could that data change if there's a concerted workforce development strategy kind of built around availability? Okay, so I'll just finish with a little bit of what LISC is up to these days, and we're not doing it alone. We have amazing support from a technical assistance team kind of coming around, a project we're standing up called the Broadband Health Hub, which is just our contribution alongside other organizations like Connect Humanity and Center on Rural Innovation. I'm going to name the rural national facing intermediaries, the Just Transition Fund. There's a list in these slides somewhere, but anyway, there's a lot of folks doing this work, and we want to reach everyone. And the way LISC thinks about our markets is looking at where, as a CDFI, we're chartered to invest. And then the question is broadband availability, and then the question is technical assistance to help answer the question of how to bring broadband. And so we go to our Community Development Corporation CDC partners, we look at their service areas, and we sort of build up from there. So again, sorry for the formatting, but the URL is Broadband Help Hub, and we'll be doing 50 projects over the next 2 years, and really excited to add to all the great contributions that are coming from all over. There's my email.
Wow, thank you all. Wow, you guys, the passion that you have for what you do is just truly amazing. We will be sure to check out that podcast. So a question for you all. I'm going to start with you, Kevin. We're going to go down the line here. But from your perspective, given where you are, how do you balance both building out rural broadband infrastructure and moving forward on adoption goals when working within new or existing communities?
So one thing we started doing with the Eastern Band is we'd go out to our communities and surrounding areas and get in their input and feedback on what's the need, and finding out what they have to say their need is, whether it's telemed, whether it's lack of educational resources, or all these connectivity issues. We take their ideas and we try to get ownership. If they are getting ownership, then they're invested, and it helps us drive this mission. One of the challenges we have is the return on investment. As stated earlier, it's not always monetary. We're looking at quality of life. So when we go out to the communities and the surrounding partners to build, that's what we take into consideration, and we bring to the table of, okay, what is your need, and how do we get there? The terrain that we have to build these infrastructures in is very challenging, and we see that contractors come in and they're not used to having to climb multiple poles and go to the top of the mountain for one house. So the return on investment isn't there. We've had contractors walk off the job within 2 weeks. So it's a big barrier there for us building in our area. But we do go out to each community and the people that we're working with and try to get their buy-in and try to pitch, hey, this is the way we need to go. These are the best standards and best processes based on the industry.
Samantha?
Everything you just said. We often have to tell multiple stories, right? We talk about telling the story of a community and what is our need and what's at stake. But ultimately, that story can be told in multiple ways to different stakeholders, right? And so I think that we often talk about infrastructure and digital opportunity activities as being kind of two sides of the same coin, right? There are some groups that understand why it's important to individuals for their personal benefit, for all of the social determinants of health, for their opportunities in life and workforce. Others might speak to a different language, and they want to understand, how does the value come back to me? And oftentimes these are our private sector stakeholders, and we need their engagement just as much, right? Because the work isn't going to sustain itself. We have grant funding coming in today, but it's going to be gone tomorrow. And so we need to understand how to tell the story of sustainability as well. And so we can't just have a shiny new network that we invested billions of dollars in and have nobody adopt, right? Or we can't just have people adopt and not meaningfully use that. We are looking throughout this region for real digital transformation. It's not just connectivity here. We are trying to transform communities into hubs of innovation and opportunity for future generations. And that means that people need to not only understand what they can do with this newfound skill and access, they need to think and dream big. And we need to be able to provide the type of on-ramp and support structure to allow them to do that, right? And to give them permission to do that. And so we often talk about, well, you might think that access needs to come first, but these need to be parallel roads. Because if you get to the end of access and don't have a plan for adoption, use, and transformation, then you're going to be behind the 8 ball yet again. And so we're often trying to think of that as a duality.
Yeah, I agree, Samantha, and would just add that, with the Broadband Help Hub, these are short-term engagements. So the idea is to be as nimble and tactical, like scenario A, B, C, right? Steps 1, 2, 3. You can go the distance, build your confidence. You've got this. Your intermediary partner or technical assistance advisor may not be with this local group of stakeholders for the duration. But what we hope to contribute is the start or continuation of that momentum that's necessary to sustain the work and get to the outcome, those long-term kind of growth and opportunity outcomes.
And as a follow-up to that, as part of those internal conversations, how do they shape intended outcomes and goals in order to determine who you work with, who to work with next, when to bring people into those conversations? And we'll start again with Christa and work our way back.
Yeah, I'll just reflect on what we've seen in our own portfolio, and that's, with these digital navigation services coordinators. I want to tell you how we came to the name Digital Connector. We did kind of a program evaluation after 2 or 3 cohorts of doing this program, and I think it was actually Merrill who said, this is a two-way conversation. I'm connecting to an individual I'm working with, and they're connecting to me. And so navigation felt one direction, and this group really wanted to be known as digital connectors. And all language matters, obviously, but this is the name that they chose for their work. And our emphasis, because we've been able to work alongside a lot more digital connectors than we have broadband planning coalitions, is to encourage those organizations that really have community knowledge to find their way back into whoever's holding the center on the infrastructure planning process. And I will acknowledge that it looks different everywhere. And so one way that we tried to sort of put our arms around that is the cohorts took on names, right? So our 4th cohort was team housing, because the intersection that we were interested in is affordable multifamily and affordable, reliable connectivity. And understanding the use case in those types of properties or neighborhoods, and talking about that work with and through to community members, and then being able to bring that back to decision makers on the infrastructure side, did pay dividends, because we had a lot of folks who went to their county commissions. Oh, you have COVID relief money left? Let's continue to fund our digital navigation services program. So, it's certainly a patient conversation, but I've been very energized by the interest that these direct community-facing organizations have in wanting to bring information into the local decision around infrastructure planning, and just finding those pathways to integrate those conversations together is fun work and important.
Yeah, absolutely. Everything you just said. There's a lot of agreement up here. We do this in two different ways. First of all, we encourage all of our planning partners to develop broadband planning groups and cohorts. So these are like stakeholder groups, contacts that often are members of organizations that interact with a lot of the covered populations that are most at risk of not having connectivity. And so we start there with the planning process and really, tap our brain trust. But also we think about, when you're starting to do program planning, is like, how do you go to where people are? Like, where are those places? And that might not be always the ones that are at the top of the list, right? Nothing against libraries, but they're not the only ones that should be on the list, right? We love our libraries, but there's a lot of other ones. Faith-based communities play a huge role in rural connectivity. They are the lifeblood of a lot of our communities, and those church basements can be great places for training and programmatic engagement. There are all different places. There are just some places that have general stores. There are barber shops. There are places in our community that are the hubs of social interaction. And those are great targets for program.
I have to agree with those comments. We do the same thing. One thing that we've run into is there's a lot of, I don't know if it's where we're a small piece of North Carolina, but consultation with funding agencies is not really good with the tribe. And the big fish in the pond swallow us up, and that's where all the funding goes. So we have to vet each partner, and we do the same thing with them, making sure that they understand what we're trying to do. We're not just trying to get a connection. Our development and planning where we own our own ISP is to put 10 gig to the home. And the big fish is just going to provide a connection because that's the cheap route. But to do it right, we have to have the proper funding to put that 10 gig to the home. So we do the same thing. We go out and we look at all the services that are there and what's given out to the community, and we vet everything that way.
Well, I'm so glad you said that, because that's going to follow up to the next question. Given the work that we do, we all understand that rural residents and communities hold a lot of identities that are unique to them. So my question to the panel is, can you share some examples of digital inclusion projects that honor cultural context and identity? And with that, I'm talking about languages and traditions and varying generations and racial composition and things like that. So I'll start with you, Kevin, on that.
Okay, going back to the slides and developing the public Wi-Fi and community Wi-Fi infrastructure. That's a quick win for our community. Developing the digital asset management system. It's not only helping the Eastern Band, but it's going to help our schools. It's going to help our colleges, as I said, to understand who we are and where we come from. Advancing telemed. It helps our emergency services. So we go that route.
Yeah, on the Appalachia Digital Accelerator Program, we work with one of our technical assistance partners, the National Digital Inclusion Alliance, to run a digital equity cohort. And what that means is ultimately it is a deep dive and kind of group working session for all of our communities to think about how best to meet the needs of those in their community. And so that actually started off with a deep investigation into, like, what are the demographics? Who are the members of my community? Do we have a large senior, population? Do we have a large second language learner group, whatever that is, it's really about, okay, so now that we know who we have, what are their needs, how do we best meet those, and where are they in our community, and where are those places of intersection. And so I want to just make sure that, what you said, Michael, is really highlighted. There is tremendous intersectionality within rural communities. We often look at the list of covered populations in BEAD and DE, and there's a line that says rural, right? Like it's something different than the other things on that same list. And that's just goes to your point that it gets kind of washed over, that rural is its own category. And really it is a melting pot of all of the other categories on the list. And so the work is deep. It's just sometimes harder to reach them because they could be spread out a little more.
Yeah. I think, my interpretation of the culture aspect of the question is to just talk about how we often say and hear kind of repeated back to us in the partnerships that we're in. High-speed internet is important, but this work moves at the speed of trust. And I have certainly observed over this kind of wonderful working relationship with all these organizations across 25 states in the country is the kind of a adaptation and reorientation to the work takes a little while. And what I think is happening is these leaders in these direct service organizations that really know their community are accounting for culture and accounting for how folks are going to kind of react to or adapt to or take advantage of or build from, kind of like digital opportunity. So our biggest kind of takeaway is any deeply rooted organization can be part of infrastructure and community development planning, because it is that knowledge of community that counts for the most. And so our digital connector program supported a fire station, a cultural heritage center, rural libraries in Deep East Texas. These are very rural, remote communities where kind of the patron population might just be several hundred. Everyone found a way, to get into the work. So there was that kind of adaptation to culture that's possible everywhere.
Very good. Does anyone want to share a digital inclusion project and their role that they had in that project?
I need a minute to think. You go first.
Our program is a planning grant, so we're not running projects, but our communities certainly are thinking about how to create those. I don't know if I can really share the specifics of one though yet.
For the Eastern Band, it's just the overarching fiber build and then advancing technology for services. We recently released a member portal where enrolled members can access services through the portal. So we're going full automation with that. In order to do that, we have to build out this fiber infrastructure. So that's a major one that's on the table for the Eastern Band.
Well, I'll talk about two other projects in addition to the Macon County, Alabama project that we were fortunate enough to work with Connect Humanity on. And one is our work with the Mississippi Band of Choctaw. And the story there that resonates a lot with me is the utility director for the tribe. His father had worked for the cable company. And it became that very same company that ended up deploying fiber connectivity to 2,000 on-reservation households when our support made possible an application to the NTIA Tribal Broadband Program. And what I loved about that is just kind of knowing the long-termism that was sort of necessary in that equation, that over generations, right? There was a relationship to kind of the community that then ultimately transpired in solving for a big objective that the Choctaw had, which is to ensure good local jobs like for young people coming up. And so from the career path of this one family to the career path of many families in the tribe, it was really amazing to witness that over the year of working on this project together. The other story I'd like to share is the role that a local funder had in financing an infrastructure build. It started with this was in Dinwiddie and Sussex counties around Petersburg, the independent city in Southside Virginia. And Petersburg had an availability, they were meeting availability, but had an affordability challenge. And then in Dinwiddie and Sussex, is a lack of availability. And so the conversation started way out here on how K-12 schools and the federally qualified health center were addressing COVID. And from there came a few folks that put their hands up and said, okay, this is really about digital opportunity, what's next? And then kind of our aperture widened to include the Cameron Foundation, which hospital conversion that's supporting a lot of community development projects there. And the Cameron Foundation found their way to providing the match requirement for the local telephone cooperatives internet build across those two counties. And then, this it was fantastic. The foundation was able to pass through their funds through kind of the governor's supplemental program to help subsidize all the other work that the Commonwealth of Virginia was doing on broadband infrastructure. So it really was an opportunity to sort of showcase who could contribute to helping pay for the realization of these projects. And from there, in that larger conversation, came Virginia State University in an interest to go after the NTIA, Connecting Minority Communities pilot program. And so VSU submitted a proposal and acknowledged, okay, Petersburg, where we're located, has availability, a last mile connectivity, but there is an adoption contribution, like we could be part of that conversation. And so their proposal not just addressed like network architecture on campus, but as was intended by the CMC program, that wider community role. And so VSU students are digital navigators right now in Petersburg and will be for the next 2 years. And so I think what's compelling about that story started way over here, with the conversation with K-12 schools and COVID response, and got to setting the table where a lot of disparate organizations could be part of, kind of solving for what's next. So really a privilege to witness all that and be part of that.
Wow, wonderful. Well, you've certainly heard from analysts. Now it's time for us to hear from you. So we're going to have a question and answer session. There are going to be mic runners, and also you can use the CVN app to ask questions.
Actually, we are at time, but we will give you some options on the CVN app. You can submit questions. There is a discussion board. Folks put topics that you could talk about before. Please respond to them. I am volunteering our speakers. If you'd like to find them at lunch and ask them specific questions, we'd love that as well.